This episode is sponsored by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First, it's free, so, doesn't get any cheaper than that. Second, there are creation tools that will allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. I'm editing this podcast from a Chromebook using the web, so it's pretty easy to do. If I can do it, you can certainly do it. Third, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so many more services. So you don't have to go to each individual podcast service and distribute it yourself. It automatically does that for you, so that's pretty awesome. Fourth, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So, it's a pretty good way to make some money. And then, last but not least, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app for iOS or Android, or go to Anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.FM to get started, or download the app for iOS or Android today. The following episode may contain language that is not suitable for certain listeners. Listener's discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Cels and Circuits podcast. I am your host, Chibeze Anakor, and on this episode, we'll be talking about why the Boomerang channel exists in 2020. Then after that, we'll get into the Ubisoft Forward highlights, and after that, we'll be talking Stadia with StadiaSource. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Alright, so first up, we're going to talk about why the Boomerang channel exists in 2020. So, I'm going to give a history of the Boomerang channel. And before I do that, I should preface this section by saying that I am going to be talking about the US TV channel of Boomerang. I won't be talking about the streaming video app as much, though that does play into a little bit of this section, but that's not the focus here. The focus here is the Boomerang TV channel, and it's the US version, so I won't be talking about any version of Boomerang outside of the US. Alright, now I've gotten that out of the way, let's get into a brief history of Boomerang. So Boomerang, it started as a block on Cartoon Network shortly after Cartoon Network's launch in 1992, and then it became its own full channel on April 1st of 2000. So that was after Cartoon Network had started to branch out into its own original programming from its Hanna-Barbera roots. So now it needed a place to put all of the legacy Hanna-Barbera and Warner Brothers cartoons that it had in its arsenal. So Boomerang, the channel, was born out of that. And for almost a decade and a half, it pretty much remained the same. There would be very little changes in its content, though as the channel grew older and older, it started to add more and more of Cartoon Network's older programming to its lineup. So once Boomerang rebranded in 2015, it started to become more like a second Cartoon Network. airing more modern programming and even airing some original programming, including shows like the new Looney Tunes show from 2015 and Bunnicula from 2016. And while Boomerang had gotten some new content, it had also started to become a dumping ground for shows that Cartoon Network didn't want anymore, such as shows like Sonic Boom and Garfield and Friends and things like that. So it seems like Boomerang hasn't evolved really as much as we'd like to think it has. Though I will say that Boomerang has started to diversify their content a lot more than they have in the past, or in the early 2000s up until the mid 2010s. So Boomerang has gone through some changes ever since the mid 2010s. First being the rebrand, but then also we had the introduction of the Boomerang streaming app, which had actually debuted in 2017. And it was a collaborative effort between the now defunct Turner Broadcasting and Warner Brothers. Nowadays, Boomerang is fully operated and owned by Warner Brothers since AT&T reorganized Warner Media and basically dismantled Turner Broadcasting. So, anyway, back to the channel. So, the Boomerang streaming service had its effects on the channel. All of a sudden, the channel wasn't as much of a priority as the streaming service. And as a result, Boomerang would get less and less content as premiere content. It would first be shown on the streaming app, and then months later on television. So you have a network that is starting to become more and more irrelevant as time goes on. And not only does the Boomerang streaming service deal a blow to the TV channel, but also HBO Max, which recently launched in May of 2020, has also had an impact on Boomerang. And so you have shows like the recently launched Looney Tunes cartoons premiere as an HBO Max original, which a show like that would have been perfect for Boomerang under different circumstances. But because Warner Media is focusing on streaming now, because that's the primary way that people consume content nowadays, it makes sense that they'd put it on HBO Max. And there are even more shows from Warner Brothers Animation and Cartoon Network Studios that are in the pipeline for HBO Max. And so it's starting to become more and more apparent that Boomerang is, or the TV channel is becoming more and more irrelevant. And the streaming services, Boomerang and HBO Max, are just the first problems that Boomerang has faced. It's also faced issues in distribution. Specifically, because it's a cable channel, it has to be offered through cable providers here in the US. And there are just some cable providers that don't provide Boomerang because it's a channel, Comcast. Just, letting y'all know it's a channel. Y'all should carry it since y'all are the biggest cable provider in the US. Just throwing that out there. But anyway, Comcast being the biggest cable provider that hasn't provided Boomerang, that's definitely hurt Boomerang's reach in terms of households that it can be broadcast in, but also it has a lack of a high definition feed, which Some people have said that there actually is a high definition feed, and some people are saying that there isn't. So we're not really sure if Boomerang has a high definition feed or not. So for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to say that it does not have a high definition feed. And that has made the channel less attractive to certain providers, such as YouTube TV, which I subscribe to. YouTube TV doesn't have Boomerang, and there are so many other providers that just don't have it, whether they're cable companies or internet-based live TV services. Some of them just don't have Boomerang, and so that's really frustrating for that channel, especially since that channel seems to have a more diverse lineup than the main Cartoon Network. But I don't know if Boomerang is really going to last that much longer as a channel. If Warner Media starts cleaning house of their channels, I wouldn't be surprised if Boomerang is the first channel to go, because Boomerang has pretty much already been supplanted by its streaming video service and HBO Max. And who knows, maybe even the streaming service Boomerang may eventually be folded into HBO Max. So where does the Boomerang channel go from here? Well, since Boomerang is now fully owned by Warner Brothers, thanks to the reorganization that I had mentioned earlier, I think Warner Brothers could use Boomerang as a alternative to Cartoon Network to try and develop at least some cartoons for the channel. But with the limited reach that it has, I don't know how effective that would be. Probably not very. And so I would also think that one avenue that Boomerang could go is, it may, or within a few years, I don't know, Boomerang may not even exist as a channel anymore and may just exclusively exist as a streaming app here in the US. Because, honestly, there's not really much of a point to it existing, but I don't know. I also think one route that Warner Brothers could go is to maybe rebrand the channel, even though I know it just got rebranded in 2015. And maybe rebranding Boomerang would probably not really make much sense, because rebrands cost money. They cost a lot of money, and it just wouldn't really make sense in an era where streaming is the dominant form of content consumption to spend all that money to rebrand a channel. But if they were to go the rebranding route, I would probably, or at least for me, maybe because I'm just nostalgic, I would like to see the Kids WB brand come back as a channel. I think that would make a lot of sense, since most of the programming that Boomerang airs nowadays are owned by Warner Brothers, so it would make a lot of sense if Boomerang got rebranded into Kids WB and we saw that brand be revived from the dead. We're getting G4 back. All of these brands are coming back from the dead, especially brands from the 90s that were really popular. And Warner Brothers is sitting on one right now, which is Kids WB. So why not bring that back as a modern channel, as a rebranded Boomerang, in a sense? I think that would be a cool idea, but that's just wishful thinking from me. It doesn't really make much sense, but a guy can dream, right? So anyway, what do you think of Boomerang? Do you think that Boomerang still has a future? Do you think that Warner Brothers should just shut down the channel? Do you think that Boomerang should go back to its roots of just only airing legacy cartoons? Or do you think that they should continue how they are in airing modern but recently ended cartoons or sharing cartoons with Cartoon Network? I want to know what you have to say. And so you can let me know on social media or on Discord, and we can continue the conversation there. But that's going to do it for this topic. Up next, we'll be getting into the Ubisoft Forward highlights. And then after that, we'll be talking Stadia with StadiaSource. The Cels and Circuits podcast will be back after this. Hey, Cels and Circuits listeners. Did you know that we now have a merch store? It's true. In partnership with Bonfire, we've launched the Cels and Circuits shop, where you can find t-shirts, hoodies, face masks, and more. So hit the link in the show notes to visit the Cels and Circuits shop and start getting your merch today. It really does help out the show. Thanks for your support, and now, back to the show. All right, and now it's time to get into the Ubisoft Forward highlights. So for those of you who don't know, Ubisoft just recently had its Ubisoft Forward presentation where it had announced a few games that are coming out relatively soon. So I'm going to be talking about the ones that I thought were pretty interesting. So first up, and probably the biggest piece of news, is that Immortals Fenyx Rising, which was formerly known as Gods and Monsters, is coming to the next-gen Xbox series of consoles, Xbox One, PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, Google Stadia, and the PC via Epic Games Store and Uplay on December 3rd, 2020, as of this recording. Now, that's great news, but one thing that happened during the Ubisoft Forward announcement of Immortals Fenyx Rising was that the big man in charge of Google Stadia himself, Mr. Phil Harrison, was brought on as a guest for Ubisoft Forward, and he announced that an exclusive demo for Immortals Fenyx Rising is coming to Google Stadia before the launch of the actual game on December 3rd. So I think that's awesome. We're getting the first demo of a AAA game by one of the biggest studios out there, Ubisoft, exclusively on Stadia. So I think that's awesome. It has a potential to draw new players into the platform, and all you really need is a Google account, which, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a pretty good chance you already have a Google account. So be on the lookout for Immortals Fenyx Rising. I will definitely be playing it when it comes out, and I will also be playing the demo on Google Stadia, and I encourage you guys to do the same, to form your own opinions on the game and not just take what an influencer says at face value. Think for yourself, play the game for yourself, and come to your own conclusions. All right. So next up, we have probably even better news than the Immortals Fenyx Rising announcement for some people, and that is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Complete Edition is coming to Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, Google Stadia, and the PC in the holiday 2020 season as of this recording. And I have to say, that's really awesome. Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game, got delisted from all of the gaming stores due to the license expiring. So now that the game and the movie, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, both 10 years old, apparently a deal was struck by Ubisoft to bring the game back. So now we're getting the game back. And there's no word on a physical release of the game. Originally, it was only released digitally. So it's understandable that people would want a physical copy of the game just to kind of prevent any problems with any future delistings, because they don't want to have to repeat that whole waiting game again. So yeah, it's understandable, but I think it's awesome that it's coming back and it's coming to more platforms, because it was originally on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. So now it's coming to Xbox One, PS4, Nintendo Switch, Google Stadia, and the PC. So pretty much everyone's going to get to play it. So that's awesome. I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I will definitely be buying that game as well. And so last but not least, we have Riders Republic, and that is coming to the next generation of the Xbox series of consoles: Xbox One, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, PC, and Google Stadia on February 25th, 2021, as of the time of this recording. And Riders Republic, from the trailer that I saw from the Ubisoft Forward event, it looked kind of like a mix of The Crew 2 and Trials Rising, which are both Ubisoft games. So, like, you get to play multiple extreme sports like snowboarding and biking or BMX, and like so many other extreme sports. So if I hadn't played Trials Rising, I wouldn't really have batted an eye to this game, but I enjoyed Trials Rising, so I am definitely looking forward to Riders Republic, and I will keep an eye out for that game when it comes out. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this topic. Did you enjoy any of the Ubisoft Forward event? What games are you most excited for? Are you excited for any of the games that I mentioned? Are you excited for any of the games that I didn't mention, like the Prince of Persia remake, or Watch Dogs Legion, or Rainbow Six Siege? Let me know on social media or on Discord, and we can continue the conversation there. But yeah, good job, Ubisoft. And now just treat your marginalized employees better. But that's about it for this topic. Up next, we'll be talking Stadia with StadiaSource. The Cels and Circuits podcast will be back in a moment. Are you a small business looking for a financial platform to do business on? Check out Payment, the first Black-owned financial platform where you can do things like sending invoices, accepting payments, and more features will be added in the future. If you watch Trigger Warning with Killer Mike on Netflix, you know that money stays within the Black community for an average of 6 hours compared to the days and sometimes weeks that other communities get. So if you want to bring or keep money in the Black community, join Payment, that's PEYMYNT, at the affiliate link in the show notes today. Hello. Welcome to this segment of the Cels and Circuits podcast. I'm your host, Chibeze Anakor, and we have a guest in this episode. So he is the video content manager at StadiaSource, and he is also the the host of the StadiaSource podcast. Welcome, Avery Krouse, to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be invited on.
All right, Avery. I mean, it's no problem. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know that was like the briefest of brief introductions, but
Sure, absolutely. I was a Stadia founder and super excited to be a part of the Stadia journey. When I first saw Phil Harrison come out in the white room with all the logos flying behind him and talking about all this stuff. So I have been a Stadia founder from almost day one. I think I maybe placed my pre-order like 2 weeks in, something like that, and was super hyped for the launch back in November. And my Stadia journey has taken me to be a part of StadiaSource, which is the number one source for Stadia news and reviews on the web. We are the number one website for anything Stadia that didn't come from Google themselves. I produce the video content for the site. I manage the video content for StadiaSource. So all of the folks that you see when you head out to our YouTube channel, the first looks and the quick looks and the source feed and the live streams and all that, I manage that team. And I host the weekly podcast. We record Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. British. Most of the team is British, British or Scottish or Irish or thereabouts. I'm one of the few Yanks on the team, and so we record Thursday evenings, and I host the Roundtable podcast.
Awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, I should probably get on a more regular schedule, but there are some times where it's just like there just aren't that, or there just isn't that much good news to cover in like animation or the tech space, and those are both things that I like to cover. So. Yeah, we can just or we could just jump right into it. Stadia, ever since its pretty rough launch in November, it's been it hasn't really gotten, or at least on the surface, you don't see a lot of like positive reception about it. And could you, or I guess, could you like tell us a little bit more about why that, could possibly be?
Sure. I think Stadia has struggled with being the first real new player in I wouldn't say crowded industry, but in a very polarized gaming industry. You are an Xbox player or a PC player or a PlayStation player, and you probably have a Switch on the side like I do, but nobody really is like, oh, I'm a Switch gamer, die hard,
Right.
So if you're in one of the three main camps, then seeing somebody new come onto the scene is weirdly threatening. It doesn't. There's nothing that takes away from the enjoyment of playing on a PlayStation just because Stadia exists. There's nothing that takes away from enjoying Xbox because Stadia exists. But there's something in the mindset, the tribal mindset of gamers, that new equals bad. And so, when the Epic Game Store launched, it was, oh no, this is what we have Steam. Why would we need anything else? And then Epic was like, well, hey, why don't we just give you free games all the time? And people were like, okay, yeah, I'll take that. I'll take the free games. So Stadia coming out is kind of in that same boat. It's a brand new thing. It's a brand new technology that's untested. And let's just be honest, Stadia corporately, has room to grow, if I say that diplomatically, in terms of how they position the system in the market. The amount of misconception out there about Stadia is enormous, and that hasn't helped.
Yeah. And I think that, or as I've said in the podcast previously, I think that like Google, like one of Google's biggest enemies is Google themselves, because they've killed so many services, like one that was near and dear to my heart, Google Allo, like which I used from day one until the day that it died. Um, and Inbox, and then Hangouts is on its deathbed, and Google Play Music is on its deathbed as well. So, like, I do think that, Google has to at least do something to, like, kind of curb people's um, hesitance to try the system out, because of that fear that it may not stick around. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I've always been really skeptical of the Google graveyard, and I get that it's so fun to say, well, Google just kills everything. And
Hmm.
the way I look at it is, just because, you know, if you move into a new house and you take all of your furniture with you, maybe you leave a couple things behind, and then you buy
Hmm.
some new furniture, and it's a bigger house, so you need more stuff. That doesn't mean you burn down the old house. That
Right.
just means that you've moved on to something new. What a lot of folks don't seem to get in the Google graveyard is, it's real fun to say, oh, haha, they killed these things. Yeah, but if you look at Goog 411, I don't know if you remember Goog 411, but you could dial 1-800 Goog 411 and get toll-free directory assistance. This was something that was going on when I was in college in the early 2000s, and
Hmm.
you could get toll-free directory assistance, and it was and all you had to do is speak. Yeah, Ricardo's Pizza on 4th Street, and it would go, "Beep, beep, 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 beep. You said Ricardo's Pizza on 4th Street. Is that correct?" And then it would give you the information. And it was amazing, because in 2003, you had to dial 411 and pay for it, or you had to
Right.
pay for it on your cell phone or whatever else. So then Google 411 is dead. It's been dead for 15 years, because
Right.
what they used was the voice detection algorithms that they built from Google 411 to develop Google Now, which itself got killed to develop Google Assistant. So
Yeah.
it's the same thing with all these things. And Allo, I used Allo, I liked Allo, but almost
Hmm.
everything that's in Allo is in messages now. The
Yep.
stickers, the Google Assistant. You don't have
Yeah.
the big little text. That's the one
God,
that you don't have.
whisper shout. God,
Whisper
I
Shout. You
miss
don't have
that.
Whisper Shout, but you've got almost everything else.
Yep.
I will also say that the one product that I mourn the loss of was Google Reader. I use Google Reader all the flipping time, like constantly, every day. I had 200 feeds in there, and I've moved on to Feedly since then, in which I still have like 200 feeds, but I miss that one every day. But you can see where Google News
Hmm.
and the feed that Google Now and the Assistant have led you there. So when people are worried about Stadia getting a grave dug in the Google graveyard, to me that says, okay, well, what are they going to use this tech for? Because they still built the tech. The tech is
Right.
still there. So all that means is, now instead of a separate app, maybe it's just in the Google Play Store. You click Assassin's Creed, Babylon, whatever they come out with in 15 years, and then that you just play it right away. Maybe that's
Right.
where this tech goes. They're not just going to abandon the tech. They've never just abandoned the tech, but they may have moved it to a new house. So I've never
Right.
been worried about the Google graveyard.
Okay. That is a very interesting way of looking at it. That's something that I hadn't considered before. So thank you for sharing that. Um, Now I'll look at everything in a much different way, when it comes to Google. Um, so so enough about like the bad stuff, about Stadia. I want this to focus more on the good. So Stadia, since its launch in November, it has grown into, or more and more into, the service that Google had promised at launch. It's not completely there yet, but there have been a lot of features added, such as wireless play on Android, such as
4K in Chrome.
4K and Chrome. I was gonna say that. You beat me by 1 second. Um, and then also things like 4G and 5G play. So all of those things have been added ever since launch. So I guess my question is, what new features are you looking forward to the most?
I think, to me, the things that are going to give Stadia a win that it needs are features that differentiate it from every other service. At this point, um, gaming on your phone is what it is, but xCloud has that.
Yep,
Uh,
GeForce
4K
now.
in Chrome is cool, but if you're already a gamer who's playing on a 4K TV, you've got a Series X, or you're getting one, you're getting a PS5, whatever, then that's not going
Yep,
to be super huge important.
yeah,
So the things that set Stadia apart are the things that only Stadia can do. So that's
yeah,
why I'm looking forward to things like crowd play.
yep,
Because to me, crowd play is the number one thing that's going to pull Stadia way ahead of everybody else. If you look at
yep,
all of the Mortal Kombat tests with Juggernaut and Kareem Jovian and
yep,
Random Gamer,
yep,
the just the enthusiasm that people showed, it was almost like a spark caught inside of the Stadia community when they're like, this is really kick-ass. I could just click this link and then I'm playing the game with you. This is amazing. And
yep,
we've known crowd play was coming. We knew
yep,
this was on the docket, but it's always been in the ether. It's at some point we're gonna get a thing they called crowd play, and they showed it off in GDC of last year or whatever else. But then to
yep.
see it and to see that it works, it
Works.
just totally works. You click the link and you're in. I played it during Juggernaut's live stream, his first stream ever. Somehow I was fast fingered enough to get one of those Mortal Kombat codes, and it was just seamless. It was amazing how seamless it was. So when September hits and we get Dead by Daylight, we get Super Bomberman R Online, these
Yep,
games that we know crowdplay is going to be there, and then once crowdplay is available, we are pretty sure it's gonna be in like Get Packed. It would be a game that would make sense for it. Ember would make
yeah.
sense for it. Orcs Must Die would make sense for it. Anything that's really Stadia first, Baldur's Gate, you know,
Wave break.
Wave Break.
I would love for that. I love that game.
It's just to be able to click a link and start going is going to be amazing. But what
Yep,
has to happen with that is, well, I was gonna say they kind of got to get the YouTube thing figured out, but everybody else that's been doing it's been doing OBS, so I guess they don't really have to get the YouTube thing figured out. But for self streaming,
hmm,
but once that launches and you've got StadiaSource and Cels and all of these people doing crowd play streams, that's going to make Stadia just tear off. Because especially when it's not StadiaSource or Cels or any of the other people who deal with technology or deal with game, but it's just some random dudes like, well, I can totally play Stadia. Oh, all I have to do is put the YouTube slug in there. Why not? Let's give this a shot. And they've got
right.
100,000 people on their channel, and suddenly it's just spreading like crazy because it's something that only Stadia can do.
Yep,
That's what I'm looking forward to. Crowd choice kind of goes along with that, but Twitch kind
yep,
of already sort of did that. So I'm not like, I think crowd choice is going to be cool, particularly with like Dead by Daylight, but
yeah,
the Twitch already did that. So I'm not super excited about crowd choice, but I'm super excited about crowd play.
yeah. I agree. Let's see. I guess I can share mine. One feature that I'm really looking forward to that Google announced, or of course, I'm looking forward to crowd play too. But if Google can get like actual people playing at 8K 120, like that would be amazing. Um, of course, like 8K would have to take off first. But I mean, with 4K being sort of the standard now, it's only a matter of time before 8K um, like starts to lower in price, especially with the TVs and stuff. Um, and like you have the PS5 and the Series X that will be capable of 8K, but I don't know if you'll be able to actually play in 8K, or if you'll be able to just like do things like watch Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever in 8K. So like it's a bit iffy there, but I think that um, or in addition to crowd play and crowd choice, which I will definitely be taking use of, I think uh, being able to play at up to 8K 120, that would be amazing.
The
Especially
first
with
game will have it will be West of Loathing, because what's there to render? We actually did find out from the developers. We keep we have a database of the resolutions and the frame rates for all the games, and they said, well, in early testing it was running at 1,000 frames per second, but since that was kind of overkill, we went ahead and locked it at 60. So granted, there's nothing to render on that game, but
right.
the technology's totally there.
I mean, it is like I could see, yeah, Wessel.
It's
If
like a
my
Monster Boy where it's all just kind of cartoony, It's not a
yeah,
whole lot, not as much to render there.
yep. Um, like I could see. I don't know if like Microsoft would be porting Minecraft to Stadia, but that would be amazing. I mean, because it's on PlayStation, it's on Switch,
8K HDR ray traced Minecraft on
Minecraft.
um
That that would get all the little kids in. But especially with things like 5G starting to deploy and see more adoption, especially in phones like the Samsung Galaxy Note 20 Ultra and things like that. I do think that 5G could possibly be the thing that drives thing cloud gaming forward, with Stadia and xCloud and GeForce Now for PC gamers. So I guess one other thing that I wanted to ask was, um, where, or I guess, God, I just had the question in my head, and
right
it
there.
just.
So I'll give you a sec to think about it, and I'll comment on something you just said. With it's a phrase that I'm sure people are getting tired of hearing on our podcast. A rising tide lifts all boats. Ultimately, the better Stadia gets, the more that's going to push xCloud. The better xCloud gets, the more that's going to push GeForce Now. The more GeForce Now does, the more that's going to push Shadow. The better Shadow does, the more it's going to push Stadia. And competition is not a bad thing. If it had literally just been Sony and Microsoft, then Xbox not appearing on the scene would not have pushed Sony to make PS1, which was great, into PS2, which was better. If Microsoft hadn't pushed real hard, and I don't know if you can call if the Wii hadn't come on the scene, that would not have, it would have allowed Sony and Microsoft to just become a little bit more complacent when they're like, no, we have to make a better console because they've done this crazy thing with the sticks and we've got to do better. So we get a lot sentences. You end up with the same thing right now. The Microsoft Sony PC war has replicated itself in Stadia, xCloud, GeForce Now, and Shadow is what Shadow is, but it's replicated itself there. And what folks don't always click into is PlayStation 4 is as good as it is because Xbox 360 came about earlier and pushed them to develop a better PlayStation. Xbox One X is where it is now because the PS4 came out and pushed them. I'm sure I'm getting the timelines wrong, but Stadia is only going to push xCloud to be better, and then xCloud is only going to push Stadia to be better. So folks shouldn't. And the other thing is you don't have to pick a side. If you decide you want Stadia, you go to stadia.google.com, and now you have Stadia. Boom. You didn't have to go to GameSpot or Amazon or Game or whatever and pay $400 for a plastic box under the TV. I don't get it. Just have Stadia. You want here, free Stadia. Enjoy. Everybody just has it. Y'all have it now, as long as you live in one of the supported countries.
Yep.
Sorry, Brazil.
Yeah, that's one thing that I do see a lot of on the Stadia comments section is like, come to Brazil, come to India. And so that's another thing that like I did want to talk about. Like, do you think that or do you think that Stadia or between Stadia and xCloud, um, like because Google and Microsoft both being the big giant tech companies that they are, um, they're definitely going to be like racing to get to countries in like or that are underdeveloped, such as like African countries, such as the Middle East, such as certain areas in Latin America. So like how, or I guess, how important um, do you think that both Google and Microsoft see, the accessibility on a worldwide stage for Stadia and xCloud?
I mean, it has to happen. There are, billion plus, couple billion people in India. They have to be there. They'll have to
Yeah,
be in Brazil. 90% of people in Brazil play games on their phones.
yeah,
You have to. South Korea is another place I believe they're not that has a huge culture of gaming and super huge high speed internet access for everyone. So they have to be there. I think what folks maybe haven't clicked into in that, and it took me a while to click into that as well, is we Stadia works so well and
yeah,
it does what it does so well that we
yep.
forget that the backbone of that is massive data centers connected
Centers.
by tremendously high speed internet
Yep,
with a supporting network of edge nodes and point of presence across these countries.
yep,
So part of the reason it's not in Brazil or it's not in Indonesia or it's not in wherever is because Google doesn't have the infrastructure there. So the challenge then being Google's got to build out the infrastructure. I guarantee you there are backhoes clearing fields right now for Google data centers in all of the countries that we don't have. I
yep,
guarantee it. But
yep,
until those are built, you can't have Stadia. Stadia is not going to be good. It needs you to be 100 miles or less from your nearest edge node.
yep,
I've just made that number up. So, but in Google's mind, those data centers are not just Stadia. Those data centers are Google Cloud, they're Google
yep,
Big Data, BigQuery, all of the
yep,
Google Cloud services, the G Suite and the whole nine yards.
yep,
So Google has a massive incentive to build out in those countries because what they are building is not just the infrastructure for Stadia, but the infrastructure for all of those government contracts they can't have right now, and all of
yep,
those mega corporate contracts they can't have right now for the tech firms and the growing industries and all those kind of things. India has a massively growing tech boom right now. South
yep,
Korea is a hub for tech in Asia.
yep,
Brazil is a hub for tech in Latin America and South America. So it has to happen.
yep, yep,
So it's gonna happen, but
yeah,
it just takes time. And what I don't
right,
want to see is there are enough people who don't think Stadia works now, despite having never tried it at all. But they heard that their cousin had a friend whose ex girlfriend once tried Stadia and it didn't work, which is
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah,
So what I don't want to have happen is they're like, and it's now available in Brazil, and however many million Brazilians go, no, it's not. It sucks, and then that just sinks that ship before it's even launched.
yeah. I think that's a good point because like we were saying earlier, like sorry, forgive me, I'm having a lot of brain farts now, when I need my brain the most. um so like we were saying earlier, like there have been like constant misconceptions about Stadia, and it's usually because people either haven't tried it yet, or people just or people's internet just can't keep up, or things like that. But um, I do think that with Google having that incentive to build out data centers in places like India, because I believe they invested some money in like one of the big telecommunications companies over there. So yeah, Google has a vested interest in expanding to countries like India and Brazil and South Korea and things like that. And they also have like all of the G Suite services there. Um, so that would be a huge advantage that Google has that um, like a company like Microsoft may not. Um, and
And once Google's backhoes start going and clearing the land, Microsoft's going to do it. Amazon's going to do it. There's
Yep.
it's they're just going to lead each other. They're going to follow each other with the money. There's money on the table, and
Yep.
there are contracts being signed that we will never know about to
Yep.
get that money. That's
Yep.
if anybody thinks for 1 second that Google and Microsoft and Amazon are like, it'd be really nice as if we just gave everybody gaming and just made gaming work. No, they want
that's
money.
just money.
They have shareholders that want money. So they're gonna, there's a billion people in India who will help give them money. They're gonna get there.
Oh yeah. So I think one area that Google would need to expand in a really big way is the way that Microsoft has in recent years by acquiring studios for first-party games, because they saw what was happening on the PlayStation side and decided to buy studios like Obsidian, Ninja Theory,
Rare.
like all of those studios that they've bought in the past few years. So do you see Google taking a similar approach in order to build out Stadia's first party library?
I think they will, and I would be really surprised if we made it to this point next year without another studio acquisition. But I think there's, if I had to conjecture, I think there's a lot of runway ahead of Stadia, and they're not quite far enough into it to really start putting that cash down. But Google has been a buyer of companies since day one. Like they bought Fitbit, they bought for a time they bought Motorola, and then they just gave it right back up again. So they bought Android. Android was not theirs, and they bought it, and then it became theirs. They bought YouTube. YouTube was not theirs. So it's only a matter of time. I think what we're beginning to see are these partnerships, like with Supermassive Games and Harmonix, Splash Damage, and those second party partnerships where we're going to pay you to make the game, you stay your own company, but it's our check, so it's our game. I think we're going to see that a lot more and more and more. We know of 4 so far. We know of 5 if you count Robot with Orcs Must Die, but we know 5. So Robot Entertainment, Splash Damage, Supermassive, Harmonix, and the other one whose name always escapes me every time I try to think of the 3 that they just announced. But anyways, Google it. It's Google. Google knows a thing. So I think we're going to see more of those. But I mean, they bought that Typhoon Studios that made Journey to Savage Planet. Even though that game is still not out on Stadia, and it's been like 7, 8, 9 months. So come on, guys. But I think we will see more purchases. I just don't think we're going to see a lot this year. Maybe by the end of the year, they might announce 1 or more. But I mean, Microsoft owns 15 or 20 separate studios. Sony Computer Entertainment owns 15 or 20 separate studios, and they bought them over the course of like 8, 9, 10 years. So I think Stadia will do that. But I also think Stadia's got to make their own mark first. It's one thing to have Outcasters and Orcs Must Die out there. It's a whole other thing for Jade Raymond and Shannon Studstill to come out with their own game that is the Stadia Games and Entertainment first party 100% our title, and we're not going to see that before maybe into next year. I'd be surprised if it didn't come until 2020. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't come until 2022. And then once they say, it's almost like, yeah, we could pay other people, but we can do it ourselves. Watch what we can do. And then when they do show what they can do, then they'll just start cutting checks. And I've said it before, there are meetings that we will never be a part of, but I guarantee you there are contracts in Redline right now with studios out there to buy them. There are guarantee it. There are contracts in Redlines right now. And however long that takes, I mean, they announced the Fitbit acquisition last summer, and they still, it's not Fitbit by Google. It's, it's still, so those things take a lot of time.
Right, because of all the regulatory, stuff
antitrust
that they have to,
and
antitrust.
I think games will be slightly less, because I mean, there's I'm sure Steam has a account somewhere, but there's probably like a couple of thousand developers on Steam across their however 36,000 games. So if Google starts buying these 2-person, 3-person studios, if they buy Eric Barone out of Stardew Valley, then nobody's gonna fight them on that. But if they're like, well, just buy Ubisoft, that might raise some flags. But there are plenty of the folks behind Ember, the folks behind Get Packed, the folks behind who would probably just be like, yeah, we'll take that. Yes, we'll take those millions of dollars. Please let us be Google. I'll take a Google employee badge. Let's do it.
And there was something that I read like once Guilt came out at the Stadia launch that led me to believe that, Tequila Works, the developers, may become part of Google because he said that the Stadia launch was the smoothest launch that, they ever had. So I think that a further integration between Google and Tequila Works would probably, work.
I'd be surprised if CodeSync and Funktronic Labs and these folks who have come out with these first on Stadia games, I'd be real surprised if those conversations weren't happening. As a part of the contract, if you sell X units, then we will put in an exploratory whatever. I'd be real surprised if some of those developers, if those conversations weren't already happening. I'd be real surprised.
I agree. And do you think that, or I guess one other thing is that over on the console side, you have PlayStation and Nintendo being Japanese companies. They've been really performing well in their home country, whereas with Microsoft, they've struggled in Japan, and they've struggled at least within the earlier Xbox days, probably up until maybe the early 2010s or so, to get Japanese games on the platform. And right now, with Stadia, you don't really see all that many Japanese games on the platform. And so do you think that we could get to start seeing more JRPGs and things like that on Stadia?
Well, right now Stadia is not available in Japan. So it's probably not doing very well there, if I had to guess. And that's another one of those kind of infrastructure things. That is a nation that I'm still surprised they're not in. But I mean, they're not in Australia or New Zealand. So it's tough. I think culturally speaking, if they're not there, they're going to have trouble attracting developers who put a high level of focus on Japan first games. We're at a point, 10 years ago, things like Japan got it, and then 4 months later we got it, or or else, and we're kind of past that, sort of. But if you still like the Switch, the Nintendo Directs still have a Japanese version and an American European version, where the Japanese version usually has a couple, 2-3 trailers that the American or the English version does not. So I think that once Stadia gets there, which they'll be there at some point, then we might start seeing more Japanese influenced games come about onto the platform. I certainly think JRPGs are underrepresented, particularly given like JRPGs are a category of game where it would work perfectly on your phone. It would work perfectly on a small screen if you have a tablet. There's a game that's on Kickstarter right now that I'm sure you're familiar with, the Ayuden Chronicle game, which is blown out Kickstarter things. I think it's the 7th. I saw today on their Facebook, it was the 7th highest gaming Kickstarter ever. And it's like 3.3 million at this point or something like that. And it is a takeoff of the Suikoden series from the PlayStation, which were my favorite games of that era. Like Final Fantasy VII, Suikoden 1, Suikoden 2. Like top 3, done.
Wow.
And I desperately want that game to be on Stadia. I desperately want it. And so far, everything they've said is PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, PC, next generation, And so they haven't mentioned it yet, but I'm hoping at some point that, because ultimately everybody's kind of in that next gen consoles, and then eventually they announce Stadia, and that's for most games right now is Sony PlayStation, and then a few months later it's coming out Stadia, it's coming, it'll be there. So I'm hoping we get there, but I agree there are some genres like that are certainly missing. We're very shooter heavy, we're kind of sports heavy ish if you throw racing in with that, but we're definitely RPG light. I guess Final Fantasy 15 and Assassin's Creed, sort of, if you want to call it that. And then Octopath, Monster Boy. And that's it. Like Octopath is the only true JRPG we have. So it's definitely a category that we're kind of light on. But even then, there's not a whole lot of those being released anymore, so it'd be ports. But there have been plenty, like Square Enix, guys, there have been plenty of your games that, if you're watching, I'm sure you are, there have been plenty of your games that you have re-released on everything from Game Boys to toasters. So give me Chrono Trigger, give me Secret of Mana, give me Final Fantasies 1 through 1000. I'll take them all, put them on Stadia, make it happen.
Give me Kingdom Hearts.
Kingdom Hearts X+4 equals the Quadrant of C by Dreams. I think is the latest version of there. Don't forget Kingdom Hearts X squared plus Y squared equals Z squared, featuring Pythagoras.
God, those names are freaking.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
So let's see. We've talked about the misconceptions. We talked about what.
I will to kind of go back to the misconceptions for just a second. I know we've been moving toward the positive, but one of the things that bothers me the most on the misconceptions front is just that people haven't tried it themselves. I think the number of folks that I see post in the Stadia subreddit, or if you search Stadia on Twitter, that just say, actually I tried it and it kind of works for me. Like that's all it takes, is just try it. But Stadia corporately has only recently begun to find its groove on clearing those misconceptions. I think in the beginning, I've said this on our podcast too, in the beginning, the commercials with the guy that looks like he was from The Roots with the hair and the 4K, it's all crazy. That stuff did not help Google. It didn't help the 28.17 teraflops and 1.21 gigawatts, Marty. Like none of that helped them in the beginning. And this recently, like of the recent Connect, where it was like 2 ways to play: get Stadia Pro and claim the games for free, or Stadia and get any game you want, just pay for it. That's the marketing. That's perfect. 2 ways to play. And now that they've kind of redirected to that, the other day they posted on their Twitter a graphic of like all the games that are on Stadia now available and coming soon, which was amazing because one of the biggest complaints is there are no games on Stadia. I'm like, no, there really are, and we have all of last year's #1 games except for Sekiro, which we'll have shortly. Other than Modern Warfare, those are the only 2 of last year's top 10 games that weren't platform exclusives that we don't have. Like, that kind of communication needs to grow more and more and more. And I think as the better of a job Stadia does at that, makes for a better job for you and I to tell folks, no, it's really cool. There's really no, you don't have to pay for it first. You don't have to subscribe to Pro. You can just buy the game you want. Hey, that game right now is on sale for half off. You don't even have to pay full price for it. Like getting people past that step. The other one that really gets me, there was a Twitter thread on this the other day. I'm trying my hardest to stay out of Twitter beefs about Stadia, and I'm failing miserably at that, but I'm trying real hard.
Me too.
Well, you have to buy the games you already own. I'm like, no, you don't. If you own them, you don't have to buy them. Don't buy them again. You already. Why would you come over here and give them 60? If you want to, you totally can. I own a couple of things on Switch and Stadia because I wanted them on both. Super Hot's amazing, and I got it on both. So, Octopath Traveler. So, but if you sold your PlayStation and bought an Xbox and you wanted to play Borderlands, which you bought on your PlayStation, you'd have to buy it again on your Xbox.
Right. Yep.
Like, yes, or hey, I already played it once. I don't need to play it again. I'll play something else that I haven't played and buy that. That one really gets under my skin, as you can probably tell. Because I'm like, you don't buy anything again unless you want to. It's a voluntary choice, but it's the exact same choice you'd make as if you sold your Switch and you wanted to move to a desktop, or you sold your PC and now you bought a PlayStation. It's the exact same choice you'd have to make there. And if you feel like you already got your money's worth out of it on Steam or on Epic or on PlayStation or on Xbox, don't buy it again on Stadia unless you want to. Unless you decided, hey, you know what? I never had a 4K device before. Now I can play Borderlands in 4K. I'm going to buy it again. Cool. Do that. But that one gets me.
Yeah. Because, I would buy Samurai Jack Battle Through Time. That just released yesterday. I'm playing it on Xbox now, but I would buy it a second time if it got a Stadia port. And I told Adult Swim Games this. So yeah. You don't have to buy the games again if you don't want to. And let's just go ahead and I guess use this final piece of our interview to just let people, or just set the record straight with Stadia and try and clear up any misconceptions that they may have.
It's as simple as this. Play the games you want anywhere you want. Buy it or subscribe to Pro. If you subscribe to Pro, you get discounts, you get better tech, and you get free games to claim. If not, simply hit the buy button and play instantly within seconds. It's that simple. There's no box under your TV. There's no plastic in the landfill. There's no wasted time of anything. You do have to have a competent internet connection, and you got to have a screen to play it on. Sometimes your router or your modem might not be great for that. If that's the case, that's why they make PlayStation and Xbox and PC. Sometimes your internet might not be great enough for that. And if that's the case, that's why they make downloadable or offline games on other platforms. But if Stadia the tech works for you, enjoy it, play it, and have fun. And by the way, if Stadia doesn't work for you, xCloud is not going to work for you, GeForce Now is not going to work for you, and Shadow are not going to work for you, because it all relies on the exact same tech, and Stadia does it better than any of them. It's that simple.
I think I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, thank you, Avery. And just one last thing, where can people find you all across the interwebs?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at BaltinNerdist, BaltInerdist, Balt I Nerdist. You can follow StadiaSource at StadiaSource. We are your number one source for Stadia news and reviews. Check out the StadiaSource Roundtable podcast. It records live on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. British. And I host that. We have amazing guests on all the time, so you'll be able to see fantastic folks. And we'll have to have you on as well one of these days if that's an available time for you.
Absolutely. I would love to.
Yep, and you can check out all of our news and reviews at StadiaSource.com.
Hey, Cels and Circuits listeners, it's Future Chibeze here, just letting you know that Avery's Twitter username has changed since the recording of this segment of the episode. His current Twitter username is @CharmCityA, and you know how we do it here. I will, of course, have a link in the show notes to his current Twitter account. He's a cool guy, so I hope you'll check him out. And now, back to the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Avery, for joining. I really appreciate it. I will, of course, have the links to everything he just mentioned in the show notes right below that subscribe or follow button, depending on which platform.
Hit those buttons. Do it right now. See that little thumbs up right here that says you like this? Hit it. Do that. Do it right now. No. We'll wait. Did you do it? Great. Fantastic. Did you hit the subscribe button? You forgot? No problem. We'll wait. Great. Thank you so much. Hit both those buttons for this guy right here.
Thank you so much, Avery. You're an amazing guest. I would love to have you on anytime. Just let me know.
Absolutely.
All right. And that's going to do it for this segment. And we'll be right back.
Sandra Bland, Terrence Crutcher, Trayvon Martin, Philando Castile, Mike Brown, Alton Sterling, Ahmaud Arbery, Walter Scott, Breonna Taylor, Eric Harris, George Floyd, Tony Robinson, Keith Childress, Romaine Brisbane, Betty Jones, Tamir Rice, Kevin Matthews, Laquan McDonald, Michael Noel, Michael Brown Jr., Roy Nelson, Eric Garner. These are just some of the names of people who have been murdered by police and have gotten either a slap on the wrist or have gotten away with committing such a heinous crime scot-free. If you are an American, or even if you're not an American, you should be outraged by this, as I am. This cannot continue to happen, and it speaks to a very long history of racism and police brutality here in the United States of America, and also in other countries as well. Police brutality is not a U.S. exclusive problem. It's happening around the globe. So, how can you help stop this? Well, you can go and protest, but be very peaceful about it, of course. And if you don't want to go to the protests, that's fine. You can also donate to many different charities that are helping with the cause. If you can't do that, you can also sign petitions to help the cause as well and share those petitions. And for all of these suggestions that I've made, you can do all of them and encourage your friends and family to do the same, because Staying silent is staying complicit, and we cannot stay complicit any longer. This change needs to happen now. And so I just want to leave you with this message. Black lives matter, always and forever. All lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. Remember that. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Cels and Circuits podcast. Remember to wear a mask, wash your hands, and practice social distancing as much as possible. Also, if you want to follow us on social media, I'll have a link in the show notes right below that subscribe or follow button, depending on which platform you're on. And that's it. Our intro and outro music is made by Tiffy3. I'm Chibeze Anakor, signing off.